Hey everybody, we are back at the hangar and today is engine day. So, if you've seen Instagram posts, you saw we had the lower half of the block and everything mounted in there. I'm 99% sure that's where that's going to be. We can obviously adjust the height with the engine mounts, which if I can grab one of those, which is this guy. So pretty straightforward, just standard Miata mount, so we can just turn these down or make them higher if we need to adjust the actual height for stuff. But here is the actual engine that we're going to use. Obviously it's in pieces, but for the people that haven't guessed it, we are obviously doing a K24, which I said before. We're going to do the K24Z3, which is the single exhaust port exit head. It's kind of the one that nobody wants. K-Power Industries has done some work with it lately and made about 500 horsepower reliably for a whole time attack season, which is pretty good. That's, right around where it was at before with the F series. And that was on a bone stock K24 with basically just a Type S oil pump and like a different cam sensor. So about as minimal as you could do. We went ahead and did forage rods and pistons. Again, just for that extra security. I didn't do anything to the block for this one. I'm going to go ahead and just run this one with the forage rods and pistons. It's CP pistons, corrilo rods. We did a 10.9 compression ratio, so not much different than what they come with. I think they come with like 11.5 stock. Again, for people that didn't see the post before, I got the engine for $150 because it had some valve damage. Well, the listing just said it had no compression on cylinder 1, so I figured there was something wrong with one of the pistons or anything like that. But I was like, well, I'm gonna replace them, so not a big deal. Worst case, I'd send the block out to get sleeved. It was $150, so it's like, why not? What ended up happening is one of the valves on cylinder 1 just had a small hole in it. I'm not sure what happened. It broke off, it melted, something. But it was a 150,000 mile motor, so who knows? But it came out of a running car and then it had no compression, so they just pulled it, sold it, and there was no damage to the cylinder. There was no damage to the stock piston that was in there. So it's literally just the valve. So what I did is went through, again, probably hard to see, but went through and replaced all the valves with just regular stock OEM ones. Cleaned up stuff as best as I could. Again, basic, just the stock springs and retainers. So kind of did an OEM refresh of everything. And now we're going to kind of start the process of putting everything back together. Make sure I get this put on here right. Sitting up on the dials a little bit. There we go. I think we're down. I can find what I'm looking for. Perfect. Cool. Awesome. Fun fact for anyone building up one of these engines ever, the standard ARP K24 head studs do not fit. You need to run the K24 Z3. That is probably the reason why this is not together, is because we ordered K24 head studs. They're literally the same for all of them, the K20, K24, whatever combination, except for the Z3 has their own. ARP actually doesn't have a set specific, so we had to go with Inline Pros, which are the upgraded ones, the M19s or M11s, whatever they are, but they show up with, of course, ARP stuff, so I'm pretty sure ARP just makes them and Inline Pro packages them and sells them. But we're gonna go ahead and get all these torqued down, which is, according to the package, only 70 foot-pounds, which is a lot less, but maybe there's no stretch to them because they're the upgraded bolts. But I'm gonna go ahead and get that sorted out. But it's nice to finally have this sealed up. It's been open and taped up and everything else. So we'll go ahead and get this on here, and then we can start working on the timing stuff, which from what I understand can be a little tricky. All right, there you go. So I got the head on, Got the cams in. The stuff isn't quite torqued yet. I'm gonna pull up the actual torque specs. Got the timing chain stuff on there, which I think is correct. I'm gonna double check, but there's a little dot there for that one. There's a dot there for that. There's a dot there for those. Those two are lined up, and everything's got, you know, whatever tension on it. It's actually kind of difficult to do by yourself because you need to hold the cams with a big wrench to kind of get everything lined up. That 50-degree TC, whatever variable timing gear on there, needs to be locked in a certain position, and it's strange because they don't quite point straight up. And I don't know, that's why I need to double check, because taking a look at this, like, you know, this one's pointed pretty straight up and that one's at 90. This one's pointed pretty straight up, but that one's not at 90. But if you look at the actual angle between this guy and this guy, this is not a 90. So they really shouldn't be, where this one is more of a 90 degrees. So, you know, just kind of basic stuff, just kind of looking at stuff to assess how it is. Again, I'm going to go through, take a look at the internet, get some torque specs for everything, and kind of continue on. The goal is to have the valve cover and everything installed today. Just hopefully get as far as we can. I'd like to set the car back in the engine and really just see. Again, if you look at the post before on Instagram where the engine was sitting on pretty low, but that is going to put the turbo kind of somewhere in this area, which the car, again, is getting some fab work done. This is going to get scooted over. The shocks are going to get tilted in, really just to make room for the 18s, because there's absolutely no room here whatsoever. So I want to put it back in the car and see where the turbo is actually going to end up, because I think it's going to end up kind of right around here in the strut tower area. So that's something I'm going to have to see and then go from there. There's also a chance we might be doing a different turbo. Again, manifolds for this engine are a little tricky. I did have this full race manifold, which is not going to work. I was hoping to do a bottom mount turbo and maybe like a reverse rotation to keep everything tucked or low, but there's just not the room with the engine on the tilt, which I didn't expect. But considering normally it's a front wheel drive engine and it's facing towards the firewall, there's an opening there and just more room. This is kind of the difference between the S series, which was a rear wheel drive engine, had a little more rear wheel drive ideas in mind when they were building it up. And then I also mounted that straight, so that gave me a lot more room. Again, I've got room to adjust the engine mounts, maybe change the angle of a few things a little bit. So I really, before we do the frame rail adjustment, which again is just going to be this coming in this little bit more, hopefully another inch or so, just to make sure we never rub anymore on like 295s. Again, that just may put the turbo stuff in a weird area, because it should end up, again, right around here in the middle. So we'll see. But if anything, back to work on the engine, and yeah, go from there. Okay, so this video's a little all over the place, kind of jumping with progress, but hard to film and do stuff. But the engine is in the car with how I have the mount set up. As you can see, there is absolutely no clearance of any kind. And that hatch that I had back here to get the spark plugs out does not line up with the valve cover anymore because the engine is on a tilt. Intake manifold looked awesome in there. I've still got to bore this out to 3 inches. But again, you can see the clearance is little to none. I can't get the valve cover off, which means I can't get the spark plugs or any of that other stuff done. The engine sits pretty good. Basically flush with the subframe like I had envisioned, but sadly we are going to drop the engine down, move it back. Again, I wanted to keep it flush, but it's just not a possibility to be able to work on the engine. The good news is there's plenty of room. The car doesn't sit that low to the ground because the subframe is up a little bit. The other thing is that the only thing really holding it back is how the oil pan has this little lip here right above the subframe. So what I'm going to do today is I'm actually just going to scoot it back as far as I'm comfortable with, lower it down, and then see where that puts us. When the car goes off to get the tube work done for the front, we're gonna kind of like make a little loop underneath that part of the subframe and then cut that center section out so we can actually drop the engine down, and the subframe will still act as like a bash bar for the oil pan. So shouldn't really cause any problems. It's just a bit of a headache, I guess, but we'll go ahead and get it sorted out. I'm gonna start working on that now, redoing the engine mounts that I made, and just see where it gets us. I really just want to be able to get the valve cover off in case we ever have to check anything at the track. I mean, I'll make carbon access panels all the way through there and whatever else to get at stuff. I have to redo this one anyway, so not a big deal, but being able to work in the car at the track is a huge ordeal. So I will go ahead and get that sorted out, get started, and then keep going. Okay, so we got the engine lowered by probably 1.75 inches. I see a lot more room now. I'm gonna put the intake manifold back on too. The other thing was that anyone that knows the Ford 8.8 diffs or even the Miata diffs, the output flange on the diff is offset like 1/2 inch to the passenger side. So we're running the engine a little offset too, which kind of help offset driver weight. This time I think we're gonna run a little centered just to give a little more room for the turbo, just because where everything kind of ends up, you know, the turbo mount here, compressor side will be here, which is pretty close actually to where the shock tower and everything is. So I need to make sure I have room for that. Let's see if I can get the tape measure here to, yeah, I mean, it's probably only, oh geez, tough to say, but maybe about 5 inches depending on where the turbo actually sits. But again, with the engine lowered, it gives us a lot more room. The other thing was, unlike the F-Series, K-Series has these guys. So it's like it protrudes out to tighten the valve cover and there's a nut that goes on top. I just ordered some dress-up bolts that replace these with like a female version, so it's just flat up here. That will actually give me a little bit more room because it keeps catching on this guy. So when I take the valve cover off, like the bottom of the valve cover catches on this, hitting everything up here. So that'll actually give me another 1/2 inch of room. So just to give you an idea where the engine sits now. All right, so this is pretty much where the engine ended up. I was able to get the intake board out. Someone pointed out that I had a very small hole. Obviously, you know, again, it was like a 2-inch hole, so now it's bored out closer to 3. Again, the car is sitting probably the lowest it's ever been. You can see right here the issue we were having with rubbing. So this is going to get moved into here. The shocks are going to get tilted in, be a little bit closer to the standard Miata angle. Right now the engine is sitting on some wooden blocks. So I need to decide on engine height. Essentially, I can raise the engine up, you know, by doing whatever with the engine mounts. The engine mounts I have a set of Delrin and a set of aluminum that are 2 inches, I think. So they'll get machined down to whatever size is needed and then go from there to really dial in ride height. But as it sits right now, the car's in a really good spot. The oil pan is a little low, but we're gonna move the subframe down to go ahead and get some protection for that. But again, the car should never be this low. Maybe at full compression, under aero load in a turn, but went and lowered the back about 3/4 inch as well. So again, the car's sitting decently low, but that's better. So, but we've got some carbon work to do on the fence. Need to redo the front end, quite a few things like that. I think that's gonna be it for this kind of episode at the moment. Again, couple exciting things coming up. A couple new carbon projects coming up that we're gonna be working on too. A couple little things. I'm going to pick up the intercooler, radiator, and transmission next weekend. So I hope we can start fitting those things up, figuring out where we're gonna put not gonna do a V-mount this time, so there's gonna be a lot more room in this area for like proper ducting out of the hood and everything else. So quite a lot of stuff to work on, but it should be good. So we'll jump into kind of the next thing in the next episode. So see you then.